Hey guys, Desolator Magic here, and it's time for some more MTG mistakes. Well, one specifically, and this one's actually a lot better than the last two. I would say that about 90% of you probably don't know that this is a thing, and that it's a thing that you've been doing incorrectly for pretty much forever. Let's rewind the clock a little bit to Theros, which was one of my favorite sets, of course. Devotion was awesome. Mixed color decks are for chumps, of course. There was a card called God's Willing, and it was only ever printed in Theros. So this was the first time the card was printed, and this is when I learned that this was a thing. So even this was news to me fairly recently. Now this card specifically says, target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn, scry 1. So scry 1 is the after effect, and then you're targeting a creature. So when you cast a spell, when it goes onto the stack, you have to say, this is the creature I'm targeting. Now, what 99% of people don't realize is that you don't have to say what color it is until the spell actually resolves. And the only way you'd really know this is if you actually read the ruling, which is just mind-boggling. I mean, it's nowhere on the card. The very first ruling says, you choose the color as God's Willing resolves. Once the color is chosen, it's too late for players to respond. Now, in this particular case, it's not very useful, because you're giving your opponent a chance to respond to the spell. And if you have it, let's say it's going to be red. Well, if they cast like a red lightning bolt on top of it, it doesn't really matter if you choose protection from red because the creature will have been destroyed by then because their spell will go off first. Now, if in response they're going to flash in a creature that's red and they don't know if you're going to choose red or not, that's kind of useful. But once the stack resolves and you declare it as an attacker, then, well, I don't know, it's an instant. So there might be a timing thing with like flash blockers, maybe just a slight advantage. And then, of course, if they want to see if you're going to choose green, because if you choose green, then that means that you won't be able to hit it with like Titanic Growth. Well, you will. You just wait for them to fail to respond and then stack another spell on top of it, which is not the normal way you build the stack, but I believe that's still legal. So then you could choose green all you want, and your green spell is on top of it. So by the time it goes on the stack, anything else important would be above it on the stack. But still, why would you give your opponent more information than you have to? And there are a lot of other spells where like you don't even choose the target of the spell until it resolves. Now here's the really fun part. You guys remember Center Soul from Dragons, which, I mean, come on, it's still legal right now. Very underplayed and underappreciated too, by the way. That one has almost the exact same wording. Target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn, rebound. And none of the rulings say anything about choosing the color as the spell resolves. I think, honestly, they just forgot to put that ruling in on it. I looked up the phrase of your choice in the Gatherer website, and all I found was just inconsistencies. Most of the spells that use the phrase have a ruling that says you don't have to choose whatever until the spell resolves, so at resolution time. But then some of them just don't say it. I mean, they don't say that you have to choose it, but they don't say that you don't have to choose it. I'm sure you're sitting there thinking, no, there has to be a pattern. There has to be some kind of, common thing. Everything in Magic is completely, like, down to the ruling and very precise, right? Wrong, and I've got an example that'll really bake your cookies. Let's look at Blessed Breath from Champions of Kamigawa. Target creature you control gains protection for the color of your choice until end of turn. Absolutely no ruling about it. Emerge Unscathed. Target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. Rebound. Literally the same thing as Center Soul. Guess what the last ruling is? You choose the color as Emerge Unscathed resolves. Once you choose a color, it's too late for players to respond. So 4 virtually identical spells, 2 of which have the correct ruling and 2 of which I'm convinced just have the ruling missing. So anytime something says of your choice, just assume you don't have to announce it because it's not truly part of the target, and the target is all that you need to know in most cases. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't find a different example, but I know they're out there and I know I've seen them. I'm pretty sure that there's a card that says, like, do this, and then period, then do this, pretty much. And so the after effect is like, sacrifice 2 creatures of your choice. You don't have to say what your choice is until the spell resolves, and only if it resolves, because sacrificing the creatures is not part of the cost. It is not prior to the colon, which always, everything before the colon is cost, everything after it is an effect. So I couldn't find the one I was looking for, but one other example, at least it got something to go off of, is Butcher of the Horde. Hate that card, by the way. He has an ability that states sacrifice another creature, so you do have to say which creature you're sacking and then do it just to put the ability on the stack because, like I said, that's part of the payment. Then, Butcher of the Horde gains your choice of Vigilance, Lifelink, or Haste until end of turn. So what you do is you say, I'm activating this ability, and then you tell your opponent, hey, are you going to respond to this ability? And then they'll say no, then priority passes back to you, and then you choose Vigilance, Lifelink, or Haste. So let's say it's a really close game, and if you choose Lifelink, they're going to blow it up, but if you choose Vigilance, then okay, not a big deal. You know, at least your life total won't recover. Then the game can go on, no problem. Well, you don't have to tell them which it is because the ruling states you choose which ability Butcher of the Horde gets when the activated ability resolves. I have seen a grand total of 0 people play this correctly. That's how bad this problem is. They'll say, oh, I'll sack this and give him Vigilance, and then look at me like, do you want to respond? Don't tell me that. Don't tell me you're not giving him lifelink, then I won't blow him up. And now the ruling didn't specifically say, and it's too late for them to respond then, but according to the actual just general rules of the game, it is then too late to respond because it says you choose which ability he gains when it resolves, like when it's in the middle of resolving, and then it's way too late for them to respond to the ability. You can't say, oh, I'm choosing Vigilance, they'll say, okay, now I'll blow him up. Nope, too late. And so if Declare Blockers phase has already occurred and then you activate it, that's the last thing they can do before combat damage resolves, I think. So yeah, they're getting hit with lifelink. There is no further passing of priority to your opponent before damage is taken. I'm like 94% sure of that. Now, one more thing I should add is that you do not necessarily always have the ability to pick some sort of choice at resolution time. I would assume it unless you read something otherwise, but let me give you a really fantastic example. The card Evangelize. Everybody loves Time Spiral, right? So this one has buyback 4, but ignore that. Gain control of target creature of an opponent's choice that he or she controls. So you'd think, oh, okay, once the spell starts to resolve, then they make the choice. The ruling actually says, word for word, when you put the spell on the stack, you choose an opponent. So that's the target opponent part. Then that opponent chooses the target, like the target creature. This is not a choice made on resolution. I have absolutely no idea why they made that ruling just specifically for that card and specifically worded that way. I guess, I mean, it's not like your opponent doesn't know which creature they're going to choose. I mean, it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. So if you have, the word choice or choose or your choice of or whatever on your card, just plug it into the Gatherer website, which is gatherer.wizards.com, and just look up the rulings, because that's the best way to know for sure. And if the rulings are blank, or if they never reference it, then assume that it means at resolution time. Oh, and by the way, I forgot this in the notes, so I'll just throw it in. Feet of Resistance, the 5th card that's a practically identical clone of the other 4. You do choose the color as Feet of Resistance resolves. That is actually the only ruling for the card. So hopefully you guys will now stop giving your opponent way too much important information before you absolutely have to, because that's honestly one of the worst things you could possibly do. And giving your opponent way too much information when you don't legally have to is actually the topic for the very next video. So hopefully I'll see you guys next video.